Okay, welcome back everyone to our Health and Safety and Wellbeing podcast mini series, where I am joined with some leaders in the industry who are changing the future of health, safety, wellbeing, and emergency management. Which is the topic of conversation today is innovating emergency management and going from compliance to capability. My name is Abby. I am the Workplace Health and Safety Product Strategist across APAC. And a lot of my role is helping customers solve problems in this space using technology. Today, I have the pleasure of having my guest, Howard Wolfsohn, here, who's an emergency management innovator for a company called Lungela. Howard, please let us know of what you're doing in this space and how did you get here?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Abby. As you mentioned, I'm the innovator and co-director of Lungela. And Lungela began across our business. We've got in excess of 50 years collective experience across the whole business.
Nice.
And probably more than 30 of which have been devoted to helping organizations across various industries from healthcare, education, corporate, industrial, retail, etc., to be prepared and fulfill not just their compliance requirements, as you mentioned earlier, but actually have capability in responding to an emergency should one unfold in their workplace. Over the last years, we've seen our industry being very dominated by several major players, and there seems to have become a bit of a trend of just doing the absolute minimum requirement to achieve the compliance. And just, I guess, to unpack that a little bit, here in Australia and New Zealand, every organisation or place of business is governed by the Australian standard, AS 3745-2010, Planning for Emergencies in Facilities. And that sets out a guideline of things that we must have in place to make sure that we're emergency ready. So, as I was saying, we've definitely seen a bit more of a push and an increasing push by companies to push the compliance, but that doesn't necessarily equate to capability. So where Lungela has come in, we've really seen an opportunity for us to impact this sector by recognizing that there is actually a big gap between I'm compliant versus I'm capable. And so we take a very partnership approach with our clients. We get to learn their people, we get to learn their organization, their lingo, how they operate, and we tailor their emergency preparedness capability specific to their needs.
Very nice. Everyone's into that personalization, so I love that. So we mentioned about, we're going more into capability rather than compliance. Of course, compliance is always going to be underlying, but is there any other trends that you're seeing in this space currently with some of the customers and clients you're working with?
Yeah, sure. So we're definitely still, I guess our industry is still a little bit stuck in days gone by. I'm sure you, like me, have been doing fire drills and evacuation drills since primary school or earlier, and the alarm goes off and we all get out the building, and we're all experts at that because we've been doing it forever. But really interestingly is what we see now is that almost Gen X and above, they can do evacuations perfectly, but are very much more limited in their shelter in place or lockdown capability. Gen Z and below are as good at sheltering and locking down as they are at evacuating. And that's really reflective of the change, I guess, in the world that we're living in. It's almost a scary thought to consider that for a real emergency response event, most of the occasions that we see that happening around the country and around the globe now, actually the best and safest response to what's unfolding is to shelter in place or lock down rather than evacuate. And yet we're still seeing this trend of, well, we've got to do an evacuation exercise. Let's set the alarms off and let's leave. So that's really where we see that there is a trend, and we're really trying to break that trend. We're really trying to break away from this idea that the emergency is fire and the action is evacuate, and start to consider that actually there could be as many as 36 different types of emergencies that could happen in your workplace. I mean, hopefully not all on the same day, because that's a very bad day at work.
Yeah, sounds like a Monday.
Yeah, just a Monday morning, that's right. But, fire being only one of those types of emergencies, and really evacuating may not necessarily be the safest response option.
I think we've all that, and I know I have, and being from the emergency background myself, um, where you're just it's always just fire. It's fire, fire. We need to evacuate. And then you sit through that training where somebody drones on for an hour of, all the different types of fire extinguishers we need to do, and planes, the fire alarms, plays them on their phone, and then you pretty much just don't remember any of it. So I completely agree that we need to branch away from just fire and evacuation. It's always important, but there's so much more and more complexities. So
Yeah.
saying that, if we're branching away from that, what are you guys doing in this space to go along with that branching away from the standard and the norm?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. So, look, definitely, as you say, there is a definite style that we've seen with some of the providers that are around. And look, in no way am I saying that the information that they're giving you is bad information or anything like that. It's all good stuff. But, what we definitely see is a few things. The first is, if the training that's being provided is just an off-the-shelf standard program, then it's limited by a couple of factors. The first being that it doesn't necessarily apply to the specifics of that site or that organization or the way it runs its operations. So there are instances where you say, well, that's all well and good. We go to the internal assembly area and contact the chief warden via the whip. But actually, my site's an industrial site. We don't have whip phones and there's no internal assembly area. So what now? So that's the one element. The other element is, if each 6 months, participants who, let's face it, are often voluntold to be on the emergency warden team, or what we call the emergency control organization, if each 6 months when they arrive to do their training, they just receive the same information, then they say, you know what, I've done the information, I've seen it, I know it, I don't need to go back again. So what we're doing in our approach is that we partner with organizations, right? So we specialize in helping you to form an EPC, which is an emergency planning committee. And we help that committee to drive project outcomes and drive program outcomes. And so the idea is that essentially, once we partner with you, we start where you're up to, we work out where you need to be, and then we work with you to take the steps to make that happen. So each time we come and see your team, we're actually building on the capability from the previous sessions rather than just giving them the same information every time.
Yeah, that sounds very refreshing.
Oh, thanks for that. Yeah, and we've definitely taken a simplified approach. I think you made the comment earlier about, somebody comes in and tells you about every class of fire extinguisher and every class of fire. And, unless you're a safety nerd like me, probably you're getting a bit heavy in the eyelids and, not really remembering that.
Yeah.
We've said, actually, you don't need to necessarily remember all of those things. What you need to do is have a simple set of tools that can be applied to every type of emergency. So what we say is we've dumbed it down to make it smart. And essentially we say there's a set of tools that you need, and you can apply that set of tools to absolutely every type of emergency, because simply by gathering the right information in and then making a decision. And that is where we often find is the sticking point for many people or individuals who are often tasked with the role of the chief warden, of the coordinator of the emergency response. They hire into a role and they're given a white hat as a consolation prize and said, great, you're the chief warden. And they say, well, great, now what? Right? So we want to apply them with a simple set of tools that they can use to simply make a decision. And then once they've made a decision, just take a bunch of actions to support that decision.
Yeah. So when we're talking about tools that we're giving people, what do you think where do you think technology has a part to play in this?
Yeah, so I think technology's got a really important part and probably an increasingly important part, and it's fantastic. Much like we just said, where people are hired into a role and potentially are doing the emergency response part of that role as an added extra, or, let's face it, if we're lucky, we're not dealing with emergencies every single day in our workplace, right? We're really only turning our attention to it each 6 months when the training rolls around. And if it's been 5.5 months since my last training and today's the day that the emergency unfolds, well, that's where technology can have that really important part to say, hey, remember about this thing, or remember these action steps, remember some of the things that are specifically applicable to our site. So it can act as that real little memory jogger to say, hey, I need to start making decisions, or these are some of the actions I need to start making. So that's a really important part of the technology piece. I think the other part, which is so important, particularly now in our environment where we've got flexible work environments, we've got hot desking, we've got people who are off-site, on-site, in and out or at any time. It's that communication piece, and one of the things that we see, which is so important and so commonly overlooked as part of emergency response, is not just what immediate actions are we taking for ourselves right now, but also considering, hey, we might have members of team who are off-site for a meeting, popped out to get a coffee, gone for lunch. How are we getting a message out to them saying something's happening here, don't come here? Or are you okay? Press 1 if you need assistance, press 2 if you're not. And that's where technology is becoming a really powerful tool for us to ensure the safety of our broader team who may not, for whatever reason, actually be caught up in the immediate space.
We are just like a mobile first generation, and everybody's got their mobile phone on them. So why would we not use the technology that they have and enable them even further, like you said, with that communication, which is so important, especially no matter what type of emergency is happening.
Yeah, totally.
So if there was one tip that you could give people who are listening, what would that tip be that they can take away?
I think great question. I think the most important thing is don't be afraid to make a decision. Right? All you really need to do, all anybody expects from you as a human being, whether or not you're tasked with one of the colored hats as part of the ECO, or whether you're just a member of team, all anybody really requires from you is to make a decision. And we often find that that's the sticking point for most. So we say simply find out exactly what's unfolding, separate assumption from fact, and based on that information, what is my safest response option? And the beauty of it is there's only two. Either I need to lock or I need to leave. And it's as simple as that. And then take a bunch of actions to support the decision. And then consider that as your constant risk management or your risk assessment tool. Take a bunch of actions. And then you can say, hey, is this still the appropriate action to be taking for what's unfolding? New information comes in, things change. So we say simply assess and act. And if you can just assess and act, then already you're taking positive steps to a good outcome.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. Question number 5, and the last question. I promise I won't keep asking you questions.
Sure.
Now, what would you say to any customers who are thinking about implementing a really robust solution for emergency management? As we know, we're celebrating the launch of our module that's coming in November, because as we know, technology is only as good as the information going in. So the technology is really only one half of how you can solve a problem.
That's exactly right. So I would say if you are looking to implement a more robust technological aspect to your emergency preparedness, hey, I applaud that. I love anybody who is going above and beyond their minimum compliance requirement. But I think you hit the nail on the head there when you said that's only half the piece. Right. So technology is not a miracle. It's not going to all of a sudden implant all this knowledge and all this skill that you never had previously. So we say it's half the piece. It's a tool to use to augment rather than replace our otherwise known information, right? So essentially we think, consider often in an organization where potentially it might sit with health and safety, it might sit with people and culture. In some instances, it even sits with the facilities team. They're the ones charged with the emergency preparedness. And they're the ones who are told, yeah, use this great new tech platform, put in all this information, and we'll all use it in an emergency. Now, two liabilities that rise there. The first is potentially that person may not, whilst they may be an expert in their field, they may not necessarily be an expert to have all the correct information going into the system. And then the other part of that is what we say, if the very first time your team see the instructions, see the plans, see the processes that we have in place, if the very first time that they see those things are when they need to use them, it's too late. Right now, I'm not saying that they need to practice it every day and they need to know everything off by heart, but it's important to have a familiarity with the system itself and the information contained within the system. So it can't be a set and forget, and it can't be considered a miracle solve all.
I think that you are going to give people a little bit of an offer here on how we can overcome that.
We are, yeah, and thanks. And look, we're really excited to be partnering with ServiceNow on this. And we say, really, you know, I mentioned earlier that we're all about understanding where you're up to and where you need to be, and then the steps that we need to take to get there. Now, the way that we do that is with something that we call a fire and life safety assessment. So essentially what it is we'll come onto your site and we'll have a look at all kinds of things. We usually just kind of go around, we chat to a few people, we take a lot of photos, and then we give you a report which gives you an overall snapshot of your capability rating based on what we found. And then from that, we're able to highlight some priorities which can boost your capability over whatever period of time as the organization or as the EPC decides. So what we're offering for today, for anybody who's watching, is we're more than pleased to offer a completely free complimentary fire and life safety assessment to anybody who wants it. And we'll happily come out to your site because, of course, can't manage it if you can't measure it. And we'll come out, we'll give you a snapshot of where you're up to. And then if you would like to continue, then obviously we're happy to work with you to help you address those priorities. That said, if you just want to take the information and be on your way, there's absolutely no obligation from our end either. But it's a really great starting point to say, hey, this is where we're up to. And so that's something that we'd like to give anyone who's watching today.
I think that's really great, especially when I'm speaking to my customers and my clients at the moment, and we're really excited about new technology to enable their emergency control organization. And I would really say that take Howard up on this offer and be able to get that fire and life safety assessment to see where you're up to, bridging that gap of where you want to be, and then use that technology to really enable your people, and especially in something to do with an emergency, which is life-threatening. I think that was great. I am going to stop giving you an interview now, Howie. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciated your time. And I look forward to working with you a little bit more on the new solution that's coming at the end of the year. So thank you for coming.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, and wonderful to chat with you. And yeah, I can't wait to work with you on the new solution and see how well it can really assist all the organizations moving forward.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks very much, Howie.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Abby.
Bye.